Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth Baker and I work for the Canadian Wildlife Federation out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I'm going to talk to you today about implementing a co-developed experimental assessment of on-demand gear with commercial fish harvesters in Atlantic Canada. So the purpose of this project was to have a sound way of informing fishermen what kind of on-demand gear would work with their conditions. Ultimately, the goal is to have enough information compiled about each of the systems so that we can inform fishers whether a system may or may not work for their fishery and their conditions. So some important things to remember in the journey toward ropeless fishing. Fishermen will most often be introduced to on-demand gear not by the developers themselves, but via other fishermen at the wharf. While we hope they will receive training to some degree on the systems, operations manuals and instruction needs to be especially clear because of this. They will rig the gear to work for their fishery, vessel, and crew, and modify the setup as necessary through trial and error as they fish the gear in order to optimize efficiency. An on-demand gear will be a tool in the toolbox to allow fishing in closed areas. It is not yet ready for full fishery conversion. These things are very important because they guide how we've initiated our trial program and how we continue to conduct trials. So I've gone over fishery suitability in past presentations, so I won't spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to reiterate the basic requirements for a ropeless system, that it must be safe and easy to use, quick and efficient, and successful in catching fish. We've broken this down into many intricate details, which we've presented on at past consortiums and can be found on the consortium website. In order to be suitable for a fishery, a system must also be complete. Because of this, we designed our experimental assessment around these three components: the acoustics, the release mechanism, and the rope containment or lift bed component. In addition to these three components, we must also consider the gear location marking system that is required to identify where the gear is set, both to the gear owner and those fishing around them. Adequate gear location marking systems are still under development for many of the systems, so it's not always possible to trial them in a complete system setting. An on-demand system will not be suitable for fishing without any one of these parts functioning properly in concert with the other three. This is why we think it's important to trial the systems as a whole where possible and in real fishing conditions to truly evaluate their suitability. If the acoustics work for a system but the containment system fails every time, then this is not a suitable system for that fishery and the environmental conditions of that fishery. I will now hand it over to my colleague, Lindsay, to describe our at-sea trials.
My name is Lindsay Wood, and I'm one of the technicians conducting at-sea trials of ropeless fishing gear. To better demonstrate what these trials entail, we wanted to show you some videos of our work. So here we are on a commercial fishing vessel. For initial trial stages, we work out of season so as not to interfere with the livelihoods of the fishers we work with. To make our trials as realistic as possible to operating in an active fishery, we use their traditional gear on their traditional fishing grounds. On each vessel, we rig up the ropeless systems to the gear and first complete several practice deployments to familiarize the crew with the proper operation of the technology before recording any data. We encourage the crew members to handle the gear as much as possible throughout our trials. In addition to our data collection, it's really important for us to get their thoughts and opinions on using this gear for commercial fishing. Once everyone is comfortable using it, we deploy the gear repeatedly, leaving it to soak overnight on occasion. We collect data on the environmental conditions and timing of each trial, as well as anything that may have gone wrong. The most important aspects of our trials are familiarizing the captains and crews with this new technology, working at sea from their fishing vessels in their traditional grounds. Our field team works with the crews in a trial and error process using the complete ropeless systems as much as possible. Some prototypes are very early on in development, and gear marking is still a work in progress, but our aim is to provide a realistic example of what ropeless fishing would look like.
Once trials are completed, the following steps are taken to evaluate each individual deployment. First, each deployment is categorized as either a success or a failure. We define a success by calling the unit, it releases and surfaces, and we can get it back. A failure is any deployment where we called for the system and it did not surface for retrieval. We then categorize both the successes and the failures based on where any variation in standard function took place. Because our definition of a success is simply that we got the system back via the ropeless method, it does not mean that every deployment went perfectly. If it took multiple signals, for example, to release the unit, then we would place that success into the acoustic variation category. We developed these definitions through an informal peer review process where we had peers conducting similar work review and critique what we had developed. By categorizing according to what component varied from standard function, we were able to provide feedback to developers on what specifically needs improvement. Additionally, if there are many operational variations, then we know that better instruction or better training was needed for the captain and crew, or perhaps more practice before they used the gear for trials. So this graph shows classifications of 318 trials conducted over the past 3 years from 6 different ports throughout Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. You will note that the sample sizes are not completely even. While we do seek a balanced design, this is difficult and takes time given challenges presented while working in a field setting. It is also important to note that these systems are constantly changing and being upgraded, and this results in new designs sometimes being developed and having to begin from scratch with sample sizes. This is another reason why data remains preliminary as we make efforts to even out the balanced design. You'll see the successful deployments here in purple, and the other 4 classifications represent the failed deployments, resulting in us not being able to retrieve the gear as designed. We can then break down the successes further, as represented in this graph. Ideal deployments were where the systems functioned as expected, and the other categorizations represent any variation from this expectation. I want to be clear that this graph and the previous graph do not provide information on suitability of the systems for fishing. What this data provides is the basis for further analysis to determine fishery suitability. Our next step is to take this data and compare it with conditions that make fisheries unique. The fishing characteristics, such as the gear type and configurations used, line types, and average weight of the catch, for example, and environmental conditions, such as the currents, depths, wind, and swell experienced. We can now take these fisheries conditions and compare them with our categorized data to see if any correlations are present. Here's an example. When we break down the categorizations of failures with this system, we see that more acoustic failures occur as the depth increases. This demonstrates that in its current stage, this system may not be suitable for fishing at depths above 30 fathom. We can also share this data with the developer of the system, which can help them improve their system and know what to improve for fisheries suitability at these depths. This is how we can start to present data to fish harvesters as well, so that they can look at their specific fishing conditions and determine which systems may be suitable for use in their fishery. Let's look at the categorizations of the EdgeTech successes, as this is the system we've done the most trials with. Of 95 successful deployments, 49 had variations from an ideal deployment. Even after breaking them down into acoustic, 27, mechanical, 15, and operational, 6 variations, we can dig deeper into the data to see exactly what these variations were. You see the acoustic variations seen in the 2 shades of pink in the pie chart. They accounted for more than half of the variations. But when we pull it out, we see that 23 of those deployments simply did not get a recovered notification. This in no way impacts the function of the system, and some systems don't even have a recovery notification functionality. But because it is a deviation from expectation, we do note it in our data. But this is why it's important to share the complete picture of the data. Initially here, it looks as though there are 30% variation acoustically, which can mean a lot of different things, but by looking more closely, we can see that this variation is actually not very impactful on fishery suitability. So looking ahead, we have a lot more data analysis to conduct. We are also working on a publication for our evaluation framework, so keep an eye out for that. We continue results sharing with fisheries stakeholders and also with developers to share our results of our trials so that they can continue to improve their systems. And we continue to advocate for further in-season trials. I just wanted to finish off the presentation with an exciting development from our trial program this past year. We were able to get some in-season trials going out of northern Cape Breton with one of our partner fishermen, Cole, and his crew. So he fishes it out of Area 19, and he was able to put some EdgeTech units on some of his snow crab pots this past August and had some good success with them. caught a lot of crab and really liked how the system worked and how it incorporated into his operations. My colleague Cameron and I were lucky enough to go out on the vessel and get some of this great footage, as well as collect some additional data and see how operations were going with the units. And this was a really great opportunity and way to move our trials forward. We're really looking forward to getting some more in-season trials on the go, both in snow crab and lobster fisheries in the coming year. So thank you all for listening. My email is here on the slide. If you have any questions or concerns about the project, feel free to shoot me an email either before or after the consortium. I want to thank my co-authors, Rill, Cameron, Sean, and my co-presenter, Lindsay, for helping with the presentation. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the consortium.